Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm here with Shelby and Taylor. And today we are talking all about self-care. And this topic is maybe something that you're like, I learned about self-care already, but we have so much good information for you, so many tips, so many warning signs, all the things. And so we're going to jump into it. But first, I want Shelby and Taylor to go ahead and introduce themselves. Shelby, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my name is Shelby Finley. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Missouri and a licensed clinical professional counselor in Kansas. I am the clinic director for the Kansas City locations for Ellie. So we have 3 locations in this area. And part of my role the reason I joined Ellie was so I could take better care of therapists. So I'm really excited to talk about self-care because I think that's the biggest reason is as a company, as an employer, I couldn't really figure out how we can pour into therapists. And then from there, I just encouraging therapists to take care of themselves, which is why I brought Taylor on so she can talk more about, as a therapist, how do you take care of yourself?
So my name is Taylor Magruder. I'm a provisionally licensed professional counselor in Missouri, and I am a therapist at the Kansas City State Line location. I work with adults 18 and up, anything from anxiety, depression, ADHD, PTSD, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Awesome. This topic is so important, especially this time of year. I mean, we just went through a lot of election stress with clients. We're moving into seasonal affective disorder season with clients. And I think that as helpers, we go through our own stuff, but we're also expected to show up for clients. And I think that sometimes we neglect ourselves and we try to continually pour from a cup that is not getting more. we're pouring from an empty cup, right? Mm-hmm. And so I am so excited about talking about this whole topic because I think that even if you're listening to this episode and you're like, don't worry, I take bubble baths when I'm stressed, or I do this, or, I go for a run after a hard day, great. But also I think that there's always room for improvement when it comes to self-care and taking care of ourselves for the sake of our families and for the sake of our clients and our employees. It's something that's super crucial. So where do you want to start, Taylor? Do you want to jump into kind of how do you know that this is something you need? What are the warning signs that maybe you're approaching burnout?
Sure, yeah. First off, I think it's so funny that you said it's not just taking bubble baths, because that's literally one of the things that I wrote down when I was writing down notes for things that I was thinking about for this was what self-care is not. It's not bubble baths and face masks. It can be. That's some physical self-care, but it's not limited to that. So for myself, I know that when I'm reaching burnout or when I'm not taking care of myself as well as I should be, I feel like my texts and my emails start to pile up a bit. I become a little bit avoidant. My to-do list grows a little bit longer. And I just start to feel really overwhelmed and resentful, kind of woe is me. And so I think at some point I then stop and I'm like, what role am I playing in this woe is me feeling that I have right now? Where am I not drawing my boundaries? Because even though it's ironic, even though I become a little avoidant, at the same time, I think I lack my boundaries and I'm not as good at being mindful of what can I really take on right now?
When you talk about boundaries and lacking boundaries, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just being able to say no, whether it's to social things and people in my life asking to hang out and go do things if I don't have the energy and I just feel like I should have the energy to do it, or clients who want to be scheduled more often or at times that I don't have available. I know I was telling Shelby, my own therapist has a pretty limited schedule. And so in the past, it's been tempting for me to schedule my own clients ahead of that until one point I was like, there's something that's not right about this where I'm continuing to schedule more people, but I'm not giving myself time to go to my own therapy because I know that I need that.
Mm-hmm. I think of when we talk about lacking our boundaries too as therapists, I think of giving ourselves more to our therapists or to our clients, or I was talking to a supervisee recently and he was talking about how he has been like giving out his personal phone number to clients too. And to me, that was like, okay, I get that you care so much about your clients and that you really are worried about them. But that's also like, I want to make sure that you're enforcing your own boundaries so that you're not leading to burnout. Because I think that one of the fastest ways to burnout is getting text messages from clients at 10, 11 p.m. saying that they're in crisis. And yes, like you want to show up for clients, but you're also not going to be able to show up when you are off the clock and you are resentful or you're feeling like, I don't know, like if you're not protecting yourself. I think that you're not going to be an effective therapist when that happens.
I think there's two benefits to that. Is one, you are taking care of yourself. The second is, as therapists, we're not supposed to have our clients become dependent on us. And if we're the only person they can text at 10, 11 o'clock, there's something to work on right there, which is let's figure out what your system is. Where's your people? Who can you call to? What are your natural resources? That way, they can start growing, because you can't be that person for the rest of this person's life that they call at 10, 11 o'clock. And then additionally, like you mentioned, that's going to burn you out as a therapist. Because even on my days off, if I get a text from, a client, I'm just like, it felt like work infringed on my time.
Right.
And so to open up that, that communication of having my personal cell phone is a hard boundary for me. But like, boundaries are different for everybody. And so if that's on a boundary for some people, that's great. But I hope they have other boundaries for sure, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that when I look back on my career at a time when I was the most burnt out and the most just like unhappy and the most anxious, was one of my very first jobs out of undergrad. I was working as like a case manager, and we didn't have work cell phones. Like we had a Google Voice number that went straight to our personal phones. And so I remember and I still have this response every time Thanksgiving comes up, because I remember there was like 3 Thanksgivings in a row where I had a crazy like crisis client that called their Google Voice number, but it went straight to my cell phone number. And that was something that when I left that job, I was like, I can never blur that boundary again. Like that's just something that I need to be able to be off the clock and not reachable occasionally. Like that's something that's important, because crisis care exists for a reason. And as an outpatient therapist, I'm not a crisis person. And so again, Shelby, you make such a good point of just making sure that clients have people that they can be relying on so that it's not always you. I'm curious, have either of you read the book Trauma Stewardship?
Yes, I love it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Actually,
she came to Kansas City 3 years ago, and I got to meet her, and she signed my book like a little nerd. I was so excited.
It. I actually was just talking to a client recently about this, because I have a couple, this is so random. I have a couple of clients that are in graduate school to become therapists, and talk about pressure. But I was talking to them about this book because it was life-changing to me. It talks about, it's more about like trauma responses and secondary stress or secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. But there's one chapter in this book that I will often recommend people read. If you don't read the rest of the book, there's this one chapter that talks about like trauma response warning signs, and like warning signs that you are essentially like not being an effective therapist anymore, because you are either experiencing secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue or burnout. And I remember reading that chapter for the very first time and feeling so called out and being like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing that avoidance, like what you were talking about, Taylor, or I'm seeing this like grandiosity where it's like, I feel like I'm the only person that can help these people when that's not true. And one of the other big warning signs that was true of me was lack of creativity, where if I'm noticing that I'm not, painting or writing or like being creative in my personal life, that's usually a really big red flag that I am getting stressed out in my professional life, or that I'm kind of over the edge or burnt out. And so to me, I highly recommend that book. It was really eye-opening just in kind of recognizing what are some of my warning signs that I'm like not taking care of myself, because I think that if for anyone who's listening, I think it's crucial to know what your warning signs are and even like communicate those to your partner or think about those and communicate them to colleagues and be like, hey, if you're noticing that I'm like buried in emails, or if you're noticing that, I'm staying past 8 p.m. when I said that I was going to be, my last client of the day was going to be 6, then call that out, please, because I think it usually means that I'm blurring some of those boundaries or that I'm really not prioritizing me throughout this professional world. But what were some of the other thoughts that you had about like the warning signs that you need to be taking care of yourself?
What are yours?
So I think something that I have to own is some of my warning signs are kind of embarrassing and kind of disheartening to own. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, the fact that I don't want to do things I normally do, or that I'm not seeing my friends as often as I normally do, or as a leader, sometimes my warning signs are just being like when someone's coming to me with a problem, just like, okay, so, and that's
minimizing,
so funny to own, and I'm not proud of that. And that's my warning sign of when someone comes to me and I don't have empathy or as much empathy as I'd like, or I don't have as much to give to that person. That's my warning sign that I've got to start pouring in, because it doesn't just impact me now as a leader. It impacts my team member. It impacts their clients. It's a trickle effect, right? And so I think as a leader, it's more important to pour into yourself, but also model self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So when I take a self-care day, just even recently I took one and I said, hey guys, I've had a lot going on. I'm going to take a self-care day. Here's who you can contact if you need anything during this day while I take a step back. And I was really grateful that my team was like, hey, I'm really happy to hear that you're taking a day for yourself. Hope it goes well. Like, so it's good feedback, but I want my team to know, like, I'm taking a step back for my self-care and for my mental health, because I think that's how you model that. And so I think, again, kind of going back to what you asked, which is sometimes we have crummy warning signs. We have to own them. Like, I have to own, like, what the problem was not it was actually a problem. It was really important to that person. And if my response was like, okay, like, that's a warning sign that I need to check myself, right?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good example, because again, I can think of times where if I am struggling, then I am that way towards my spouse too, where it's like he comes home and he's like, I had a bad day at work. I'm like, bet you didn't have to make a CPS report today. Or, like, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm so guilty of that, you guys. Like,
yeah. I mean, I used to work in crisis. So when someone would be like, oh, my boyfriend broke up with me, I'm like, yeah, you're not hospitalized though, so keep going, sis. Like, keep moving. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so crummy.
No, but minimizing is such a real,
yes,
super real warning sign that if you are not taking care of yourself, like, you can't have empathy for others. And we need to be able to sit across from the people who are dealing with a breakup and they're really sad. And we also need to be able to, sit across from the people who are actually in, like, maybe I shouldn't say actually, but, like the people who are in maybe more immediate crisis too.
Right.
But such a good example. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what do you two do for self-care?
I think my biggest thing about self-care is just that it's preventative and it's constant and it's not optional. It's not when you need self-care, it's taking care of yourself all the time. And so something that is important for me is like having like a ritual when I get home from work every day. Like I don't do these things because I need them today. I do them because I need them all the time. And I just need to have a thing to tell my brain like, hey, work's over now. And so something I like to do when I get home is I just do like a nice full body stretch, like 5-10 minutes. That's kind of my like, at the least, I know that I can do that. Like I don't have time to do, like I like to do a nice little dance workout. That's like my, it's like so fun for me. I danced growing up. And so I used to like go on walks and just do other like general workout things. And I found myself not feeling super motivated to do that. And so when I found these dance workouts that I do, I like genuinely have so much fun doing them. And I feel so fulfilled. And I just like, we sit all day and we use our brains all day. So like I have to do something when I get home that is like moving my body, getting into my body, getting in tune. Within at the least, that's a stretch. Or on a regular day, I like to do my dances. That's fun.
Okay, where are you finding dance workouts? Because I love this idea. Dancing is so good for your mental health.
Yes.
And
yes.
I have noticed like I mean, I like do fun little silly dances with my kids all the time and they love that.
Mhm.
And I mean, and I love that too. But like, are you just going on YouTube and being like dance workouts or like what kind of workouts are you looking at?
So I use Apple Fitness Plus. They
Yeah.
have like all kinds of different like yoga, meditation, like HIIT workouts. I just do the dance ones. And basically they're like choreographed dances, which like I would find myself getting kind of bored with Zumba because it's more like dancing, but the main point is like working out and moving the
Yep.
whole time. And this one is like, I'm so focused on the choreography. I'm like, I'm going to kill this. Like that is like my focus. And that's why I'm like, I'm having so much fun. And then I found myself some days being like, because I have to like get my little Apple TV out and plug it in. And sometimes it's like move all the bar stools in the kitchen. Like sometimes it's a process. And so I also started just like getting home from work and I'll play just some of my favorite like recent pop hits, whatever they are. Real into Sabrina Carpenter right now. And then I like grab the TV remote and then I just like dance, like free dance, like in my
It's like a Lizzie McGuire moment where you're like
exactly.
singing
It is like that. Envision that. That's me when I get home.
I love that.
My dog
so
hates
much.
it. He's like really not a fan, but I have fun.
He's getting a free concert. What is his
I know.
problem?
And I like sing to him and he's like looking at me with his ears down. He's like, no.
I love this. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's such a good example of like rituals right after work. Shelby, what about you?
So in terms of rituals after work, my thing is working out. It's really good for my mental health. So I've learned, especially during the season of fall and winter, if I go home and I sit on my couch, your girl's not getting up. She's there. She's there till 10 o'clock at night, like on her phone and then not doing anything else. Maybe the TV's on. And so my thing is as soon as I get home, I take my dog for a walk and then I get dressed for the gym. I know if I have taken the effort to put on the gym clothes, I'm going to go to the gym or at least I'm going to do a home workout. So that's like the big thing. For me, I think the biggest thing for me that I've learned is to check myself on, is it an introverted day or an extroverted day? Do I need people to feel good about today? Or do I need no people to feel good about the day, right? And so I'm not a crafty girly, but I wanted something that wasn't just TV or reading. And so recently I got into the jewelry art. Does that make sense? Like the diamond painting or whatever it's called. Loving that. Just making cute little ones for my nieces and nephews for Christmas. And so that's just been so fun. And it's not normal for me to do that. And so that's why I always have to take a step. It's not, everyone's always like, oh, I'm an extroverted person, I'm very social. That's never what it was intended to be. It's like in this moment, do you need people or do you need time by yourself? And so I check on that daily because it absolutely changes daily. I would assume, and Taylor, tell me if this is true for you and same for you, Miranda, like on days where I've had back-to-back sessions, back-to-back meetings, I don't want to talk to people when I get home, right? Last thing I want to do is go socialize over chips and queso with my girlfriends. But then there are some days, like on the weekends, where I'm like, oh, it's girls' time. Like, where's my friends? What are we doing? What's the plan? Do you feel like you're more extrovert on the weekends and introvert on the weekdays?
Totally. Like, I think on the weekdays, even if we're planning something in advance and someone wants to do something on a weekday, I'm like, that's going to be iffy for me. On a weekday, I want to go home. I want to stretch and dance and color and journal and just do my introverted things. And I think that was hard for me to figure out because I think for a long time I thought I was really extroverted until I had to really start taking care of myself. And I realized like, I think I'm actually kind of drained after I hang out with people sometimes. Like, this is new. And so then after I realized that, I was like, oh, maybe like, it's not because I'm being avoidant or because I'm not connected with the people around me. It's because like I really just need to fill my own cup sometimes in other ways.
I so relate to that. I'm definitely like an outgoing introvert where I like being with people to a certain extent, but in order to like really recharge my batteries, I need some alone time and to be able to just be at home and relax and just not be surrounded by people all the time. So I totally get that. When I was in a really, really high stress job, like when I did child protection, I specifically worked in a county that was like a county over from where I lived. And I thought like, oh, I want to work in a different county because this will give me some separation. So I'm not like running into clients at a grocery store. And like, yeah, that was true. But I actually realized that the decompression time of the drive was so beneficial for me, like really, really helpful. I would usually like listen to a podcast or music on the way there. And then on the way home, I would call my mom or listen to music. And I realized that I'm someone who really needs some decompression time after after most days of work. And whether that be like a drive home or if I'm working remotely, then it's listening to music or listening to stand-up comedy while I make dinner or, like having something where I can still just like almost be in my head or like not immediately have to be on or talking to someone and just having some time where I can like be with myself, I think is really helpful. And I remember when COVID first happened and all of the lockdowns happened and I really struggled at first because I was like, I don't have this decompression time. I'm home with my partner and my housemates. At the time we lived with 3 other people. And it was so hard to just like suddenly be around people and not recognize like what I needed immediately after work. And so I got a dog. I was like one of those people that got a COVID dog. And it was so helpful. And I mean, she's still like our first baby and she's still it's so helpful to have her because she forces us to like get out of the house and go for a walk right after work. And even today, if I'm feeling like I'm having a stressful day or if I have like a really intense session, then I'll try to like just walk around the block. And I realized that even just like having that really short moment where I'm out of the house and breathing fresh air and allowing the sun to be on my face, like makes such a big difference. And so, I mean, those are like the main things for me immediately when I'm done with work. But gosh, I'm trying to think of more like preventative self-care things. You have me thinking, Taylor. Like what else are you all doing for preventative self-care?
I think it's important to talk about what we're doing during the day because we really highlighted
yeah.
like what we're doing after work. We all love PTO. I made a joke earlier. I was built for PTO. I was born to do a PTO day. But like what's outside of that? Because like you're talking about, it's preventative, right? And so during your days, I'm curious, Taylor, what you do like when you have those 7 session days or plus, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think sometimes it's easy to overthink what self-care is. And it's important to go back to like our basic human needs. Like, am I eating meals? Am I sleeping? Am I drinking water? Am I exercising? Like, am I doing all of those things just generally all the time? Like those things are all preventative. And I think because they feel like givens, we kind of devalue them sometimes. So I think during my day, making sure that I have my snacks, I'm drinking my water. And Shelby and I were talking earlier about like, when I have a break between sessions, like some days, if it's an extroverted day, I want to go chit chat with my coworkers. I want to consult and hang out with people. And some days I'm like, maybe I need to like stretch and just kind of like meditate, journal.
Take a nap on my couch.
Exactly. Take a nap on my couch. That's totally a thing. Sometimes I need to do that. Like it's easy to be at work and fill that time with like, I got to do notes and treatment planning and all these things. And a lot of times I do. But some days it's nice to really just think about like what I actually need. Like, okay, I have 4 more sessions after this. So what do I need to do to feel relaxed and prepared and to be able to be fully present in those sessions? Stretching is a big thing for me. I get really bad tension in my shoulders. And so my physical therapist taught me some really good exercises for my shoulders that I specifically like to do during the day at work. And that's a good one for me.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, it's like kind of finding those work perks, you know what I mean? And one of ours is like, we have comfy couches at our jobs, right? I don't know anyone else. It's like in a cubicle, like, oh, it's so comfy just to hang out in my office. I'm like, we have that. So I actually just recently went to a self-care day conference with CEUs. It's put on by another private practice in this area. And I loved it. And, people kind of normalize, like in between sessions, I shut my door, turn off my lights and just put my head down. I don't get on my phone because I just need a moment to not be absorbing information, absorbing things. And I'm like, gosh, we really don't talk about that enough. And I feel like at my first job as a therapist, I was so scared to do that. And I remember I went to my supervisor, like, I'm just having an off day. I'm just not snapping. Like I am just slow. And she just said, and I didn't have as comfy as an office, but she was like, turn off your lights and lay your head down. And I was like, can I do that at the job? She's like, you have 20 minutes before your next session. Like if it gets you back to where you're going to really deliver in that session, please take 20 minutes to put your head down and just not think or do, a meditation or something. Like you've got to self-care throughout your day. And I've always wanted to ensure my employees know, like, shut your lights off, sit down on the couch. If you had a no-show and you really don't need to get notes done, and you just really need to pour into yourself, those couches are very comfy.
I I I think every therapist I've met has taken a nap on their couch at some point, or at least like laid down just to kind of relax because yes, absolutely. I think I I don't really see clients back to back as much as I used to, but I remember those days where it was like, okay, I have an hour between clients or I have 30 minutes between clients. I'm just going to scroll on my phone for like that whole time. And that didn't help. It made me more anxious, or it like just made me feel like the time flew by too quickly and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I had other things that I needed to do." And um I will often like I mean I will say like it's nice to send text messages, like be in contact with other people. I think that there's good things you can do on your phone obviously, but like if you're just doom scrolling, I or like just scrolling through TikTok endlessly, it is not going to be helpful. It's just going to kind of like cause more of that anxiety, or I don't know. I'm so guilty of this. I'm trying to think of other things that I like to do during the day for self-care.
I will say, if you don't mind, one thing I took also away from that self-care day that I went to was someone said it and everyone like rallied behind it. As a leader, I never thought about it as a leader normalizing 50-minute meetings instead of 1 hour meetings. Because if you think about it, your employees that you're getting out of a meeting have a 1 o'clock if your meeting ends at 1. So now they're having to go straight from that meeting, no time for a bathroom break, no time for water, no time to decompress from the information you just gave them. And they're grabbing a client and getting right into it. And they have another client and they have another client. Now they had 6 hours where they'd never found a break, right? And so I've tried really hard since then to be intentional about stopping meetings at 50 minutes because I also think that's setting an example where client or clinicians coming to me and saying, I'm really burned out. I don't have any time between my session. I'm like, hey, end them at your mark at 53 minutes is what ours is. End it at that 53 minute and then take time for yourself. You have 7 minutes decompress. And they're saying, well, it's so hard to get the client to wrap up and all that. And if I'm saying if there's a way to do it, why can I not finish a meeting in 50 minutes? You know what I'm saying? And so I think I'm trying to set a better example of that. And also if I can give my clinicians 10 extra minutes in their day they weren't accounting for, like that feels good.
I love that idea. That's such a good idea. And I think that again, like when I first started as a therapist, I had so much trouble ending on that 53-minute mark or even like 55-minute mark. But over time, it is something that you start to get better at, especially when you're watching the clock. And I think that we've had an episode before where we talked about this a little bit. And I had a different guest that was talking about how she uses like alarms, like the alarm will go off at the 53-minute mark. And that's not really my style, where like I think that would be really jarring if a client was like right in the middle of something and then your phone alarm went off. But like most of my clients that I've been seeing or that I see currently, I've been seeing for a while. And so I'm able to they know the arc of my session, right? Like they know when I'm start to be like, okay, what are you doing this week to take care of yourself? What are you doing this week too? And same for my supervisees. When I do clinical supervision, and same for them, where it's like, all right, what are you doing this week? We talked about so much today. What are some takeaways that you have? Or what are you going to do as soon as you leave here? What are you going to take care of? What are you going to do to take care of yourself? And I think that having some of those kind of like repetitive questions that you ask at every session starts to help them realize, oh, we're wrapping up at this point. I think it's just like a very easy way for them to recognize, okay, we're getting to the end of our time now. And so I found that to be really helpful in setting those, again, like preventative self-care, setting those boundaries, those time boundaries, so that I make sure that I have enough time and in between sessions and in between meetings. I think that's so valuable. Awesome.
Yeah.
What other thoughts? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Taylor.
No, that's okay. I was just kind of thinking, I think another kind of underrated coping skill for self-care is just like positive self-talk. And I'm talking like out loud. Like I talk to myself out loud all the time. And especially like on my way home from work, it just like, it was a long day, sis. We got this. We're going to go home. We're going to color. It's going to be great. You're feeling a little stressed. That's okay. Like just because I think that's why a lot of times we feel like we need to be like validated from other people. And while that can be great, it's also really nice to just say it to yourself. Like I like to use it in like we terms because it feels like me and my brain, we're on the same team. I'm like, we got this. And that's just kind of, I don't know. I think it's It's one that I recently have been putting a little bit more
I
effort
love
into.
that. I think we need to normalize talking to ourselves. That's such a normal thing. Tell me you've never... I mean, I always joke that I think my neighbors think I'm not well because I'm either talking to myself or my dog. And then I talk to my dog, I talk in a British accent. I don't know why. His name's Winston. Maybe that's why. I was like, is she well? Probably not.
Does she know that I can't understand her?
Yes. You guys brought up both good places, which is... We're going to get back into after work, which is that car ride home. Miranda, you talked about how that you need that time. You need like a distance between like your workplace and your home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I know me, I hate getting stuck in traffic. I hate if I have more than a 20-minute car ride home, and it drives me crazy. And so even, when before I was at LA, when I was looking at other jobs at times, I was like, oh, I would love it, but it's all the way up north and I don't want to drive 40 minutes to work. And these things really matter to me, whereas some people like, no, that pours into me. So I think it comes down to also as a therapist, when you're starting to look at for a job, like, what do you need? Do you need a place far away or do you need a place down the street from you, And with me starting, being employee number one, I really got to say, I'm like, hey, these are the 2 locations you're looking at. These are what I would love to drive to.
Yes, yeah.
It's kind of bratty in that sense, but I've loved the fact that my car ride's never more than 20 minutes for the most part, except for trafficy days. And something else I've learned from therapists that's common is on your ride home, when do you turn it off? When do you stop thinking about the day? When do you let it go? Because we carry stuff with us, right? So we had I'm a trauma therapist. And so doing EMDR, but I hear horrific things that have happened to humans that I care about and want the best for. And that stays with me. And how do I get it out of my system? How do I get it out of my nervous system? And I've learned something from other therapists, which is they find a place on their drive and that's where they stop.
Oh.
And so when I live in a place called Lee Summit, there's a welcome, yours truly, Lee Summit welcome sign. You know the one?
Yep.
It's kind of weird. But you see it and I'm on my drive and I've started saying, all right, no more work. I'm going to set a boundary. And just like in EMDR, we talk about containers where I keep it in my container. I keep it on that sign. Whereas the stress, the frustrations, even, the victories of that day, this is now I'm home. I'm at my place and I'm going to think about my personal life now. And I've heard a lot of therapists talk about doing that and that they have some kind of rock or park or a sign where they leave it.
That's a stoplight.
Here's a stoplight. Okay.
I actually have a weird, from where I leave the office till the stoplight, I have no service on my phone. Don't know why. I don't love that for T-Mobile, but that's okay because it has made this possible. Where I can't really call anyone or really listen to music on this 7-minute stint of my drive. And so I've been like, okay, well, let's turn this into something productive. So now when I get to this one stoplight where I then have service again, after that, then I let go of work and I can listen to music or call someone or something. But I take those first few minutes to just decompress, do the self-talk thing,
Shelby, you made me think of a couple of different things. But so that decompression time, yes, it's so crucial for me in that job that I was in. But also let's normalize not staying in shitty jobs that require so much more self-care or yes, we should be taking care of ourselves. But gosh, before I came to LA, I had so many jobs that took so much out of me that required me to pour so much. And I think that for those jobs, a long drive was really helpful because I needed that separation way more than I do now. And so I think that yes, self-care is so crucial for any helping profession, but also no amount of self-care is going to make your job not suck. If you are in a toxic work environment, if you are not appreciated, if you are underpaid, if you are in a job that just is really, really shitty, then it is not going to, no amount of self-care is going to help you with that. And so let's also, call out changing jobs sometimes can be an act of self-care because you are a highly skilled, highly educated professional, and you deserve to be in a job that prioritizes your mental health too, because that's so, so crucial. So I just wanted to say that because it made me think of that, where I was I don't this is going to sound backwards, but I don't need as much self-care as I used to in some of those really bad jobs either, because I think that by being in a job that I love, it is also a form of self-care and a form of taking care of myself. And
Yeah.
so I think that's just
Yeah.
super important. And it exists for people. Like it's something that people can have. But
Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point, like with clients, where we're giving them all the coping skills and they're saying they're doing the coping skill, but it's not getting better. Okay, well, maybe it is the relationship. Maybe it is the job. Maybe it
Yeah.
is what have you. Maybe it's the city, you know what I'm saying? And so I think
Yeah.
at some point, you can only do so much to cope before you have to say, like, the environment's not set up for me to feel well.
So
And
true.
again, if you're having to, I remember in one of my first jobs, it was a 40-hour-a-week job, community mental health, and it was seeing clients back to back. And if you weren't seeing clients, you better jump in on a group so you get your productivity. And it was just a turning, and I was exhausted. And I remember it was the first job I had when I moved to Kansas City, and I wasn't making any friends because all weekend long, I just had to sit.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't, I didn't have it in me to go and meet people or go and do things. And I was like, this is not sustainable. I don't know anyone in this city. I'm very lonely, but I don't have the energy to meet people. And so, I grew into a leadership role that gave me more capacity to pour into myself. But yeah, I think you're right. I think after some degree, you have to recognize, is it me? Is it me not self-caring? Or is it just my environment's not set up? And what do I need to change in my environment?
Yeah.
So Shelby, you mentioned the ProQol. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's how I say it.
Okay. Could you give a little bit of some background? And when I say you mentioned it, before we started recording, you started talking about how this is a tool that you use with the therapists that work for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about the ProQol and how you actually use it?
Yeah, so it's the Professional Quality of Life Survey, and it measures 3 different things: burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary trauma. And so I love it. I think it's close, like it's either between 20 and 40 questions. I can't think off the top of my head, where people can go online and do it just quickly, or they can actually take the measure and print it out and, and then score themselves and see where they're at. What are their levels of burnout, levels of compassion fatigue, and then levels of secondary trauma. And they can see, like, how am I doing? Something we've all said but not called out is you have to keep assessing yourself. Just like our clients have to keep assessing how they're doing, as therapists, even more so, we have to assess how we're doing, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, there's a trickle effect of that, right? And so this is a great way for me as a leader to encourage my team to check in on themselves if they're not doing it naturally by themselves. And so I give it out once a quarter. I just send it in an email to my team, the, printable, version of it, as well as the link to go online and do it. And I encourage them to do it. I don't say they need to talk to me about it or I need their scores. I just say, if you want to talk about it, please come, let's chat about what's going on. And it's just an extra way to make sure my team is checking in on themselves, because I know as therapists, we're chronically thinking about our clients, right? We have personalized, we're empathetic people. We're people, right? We're always thinking about other people but ourselves. I think that's always been my responsibility and as a leader in mental health, is ensure my therapists are thinking about themselves and checking in. So it's just been a great one. I honestly cannot remember where I learned about the ProQol, but it has stayed with me as a leader. Before I came to LA, it was something I did, and it's always been something, therapists have wanted to share with me at times and said, hey, I wanted to let you know, since coming to LA, my score has gone down 5 points on compassion fatigue. And I'm like, I love hearing that. Let's keep it up. Let me know what I can do for you. And that's like one of the examples where, like, clearly the environment this person was in was the change they needed, right?
We will share a link to the ProQol and what Shelby's talking about in the description, because I think it's something that everyone listening should probably go do and just kind of take a self-inventory of, how am I doing right now? I'm hearing maybe some of the warning signs that I'm recognizing in myself and realizing that there's probably more I could do. But I think that having an assessment like that can be really helpful, just to kind of be like, I am maybe more stressed than I realize, or maybe experiencing more burnout than I realize. And that can be so valuable. Okay, other tools that you all are using to encourage other therapists to care for themselves, or clients, or things that you're doing for yourself?
Yeah. So there's this app that actually one of my clients told me about, and it's called How We Feel. And the purpose of the app is basically to track your emotions and to practice identifying them, noticing them, just being more aware of them overall. So I have mine, like basically you can set it to send you reminders however often. And I have mine set for twice a day. It sends them like, you can set it for like a specific time, or you can say like anytime between 9 and noon, anytime between 6 and 9. Because I feel like when it was a little more consistent, that was when it was easier for me to ignore it. And now that is also a sign to me that I'm not taking care of myself. If I'm not on my feelings app, I'm like, ooh, someone's being a little avoidant. So basically, it just asks like, how are you feeling today? And it has all of these emotions and it has all of the definitions for all the emotions, which I really, really love. Because I think it's really easy to kind of overgeneralize. Like, I feel stressed. I feel overwhelmed. Like, what do you feel stressed about? What do you feel overwhelmed about? How can you break that down into a more specific emotion so that you can more specifically understand what you need at that time? And then it also provides a lot of like coping skills and then some like emotion education videos and things. And it's totally free, which is great. There's no subscription or anything involved. And then I have a lot of clients who like really love like data, like any form of seeing data on things. And that's kind of what really draws people into this app is that there's an analysis section where it breaks down all of your emotions that you've been tracking. Because when you track them, you can say, I'm feeling these things. And then you can like journal a little bit about it. Or you can say, like, this is who I'm with and this is where I'm at and this is what I'm doing. You can connect it to, if you have like a Fitbit or an app that tracks your cycle or anything like that, you can connect it to those things. And then the analysis section shows all like the trends and why am I marking that I'm anxious a lot of the time in the mornings? Like, what's going on in the mornings then for me? And it shows helpful trends and things like that. So I feel like that's been a really helpful way for me and just for a lot of my clients. I think almost all of my clients either know about it or use it. And it's just really helpful to get a little bit more in tune with that. It's a good, easy way to open it up and see how they've been doing.
I have a couple of clients who will like pull out their phones and they're like go to their notes app and be like, okay, here are the things that I want to talk to you about, or like, here's what I'm noticing. And I could see them really liking an app like that. That's just kind of prompting them to think about how they're feeling so that then they can analyze some of those patterns. And very cool. I'll include a link to that as well. I think that anytime we have resources that work for clients, yes, that's great. But also when we're like able to get more insight about ourselves and how we can be taking care of ourselves that's great. It's awesome. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the biggest rule that it can't be said enough is that every good therapist has a therapist. Yes. And just like, if you think about personal training, it's just someone to hold you accountable. Even if you know how to use the machines, you know how to work out, you know how to diet, that personal trainer helps hold you accountable. I always have a gym buddy. If I'm not meeting someone at the gym, I'm probably not going to make it. I'll give myself excuses. But if someone's meeting me there and I'm expected to show up, I'm going to, right? And so sometimes just having a therapist to check in with biweekly, once a month to say, how are you doing self-care can be helpful. And I've had people come in and, that was all they wanted to work on as a therapist. And I love that. It's just a check-in buddy to say, are you taking care of yourself? Because what we do is really, really hard. It's also so unique. Like when I think about some of my days, I'm like, no one else said that in their day probably at work, but I did twice. And so I just think we do such a unique but really challenging and really hard job. And so even more than how we're encouraging our clients to pour into themselves, we have to double down on ourselves because we give all day long.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. This has been a really good episode. And I feel like I've gotten so many good ideas. And gosh, I need to do a better job of checking in with my supervisees, especially when it comes to how they're caring for themselves. And so this has been a really good reminder of how I can be doing that and what I can be reminding them of. So thank you both so much for joining. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for the invite. We appreciate it. Yes.